Hey, Heather.
Hello to everyone, and welcome to Work Your Best Life, an unfiltered conversation about when work isn't working. Today, we thought we would talk to teachers, right, Hollis?
Absolutely. Teachers are one of our most popular group that we hear from. So I'm excited to share what we hear from teachers, the common questions that we get, and send some encouragement that teachers are in high demand in areas other than just in schools.
I know it's sad because I hate for great people to leave teaching, but we also have to listen to them and recognize it's just not what it used to be. Teaching, definitely, I hear from a lot of teachers that it's not what they signed up for, it's not what they thought it would be, and more importantly, especially since the pandemic, teaching has really changed and a different skill set almost entirely is really needed. And so it makes sense that teachers might not love teaching anymore because the different skill sets that are now required might not have been aligned with who they were in the beginning.
Teaching used to be more creative, require a lot more independence. Now there's a lot more paperwork, administrative end, and it's a much more conventional career. So I believe over the next several years that it'll take a different kind of person to become a teacher. So we're in the mix right now where the folks who really wanted more creativity and independence are um, now finding different paths to use those skills.
Yeah, and I think behaviorally it's really changed too. The kids have become so much different since the pandemic. So it's really changed from a behavioral standpoint, and the people that have the skill set that were equipped for behavior before might not necessarily be equipped anymore. I've heard that as a big frustration. So yeah, let's figure out how we can help them and give them some encouragement and advice and um yeah, get started. Let's get to it.
So this is not the first time in history that teaching has been a challenge and that there has been a change out in the type of person who would be interested in teaching. So do you want to share the background of how Dr. Helen Harkness, the founder of Career Design, got started this business with teachers?
Yeah, so so Dr. Harkness was a teacher in the 60s and 70s, long time ago, when it was obviously very much different. There were similarities, but different in the sense that it was much more intellection and research based. So she was an academia, loved all her degrees, loved PhDs and research. And I think that for her, when she realized she had to get out of teaching, it was a financial decision. She did high school and she was also a college professor. And she always would say that with her degrees and a nickel, she could buy a cup of coffee because she just really couldn't raise her family on a teacher's salary. And so but she didn't know where to turn because she had education as a background. She loved education. There was really nothing else to do in her mind. And she didn't even know career counselors or career coaches didn't really exist in the 70s, and she didn't really know how to go about and find that. So she dug into what she knew, which was research, and really starting to figure out how can you put some methodology to finding a career. And that's how career design got started, is through that research. So really teaching is the reason that career design was born. And she really came up, she studied and did work with Dr. John Holland, a psychologist, and really did research on how you're wired, the skills that you have, and how you can take that information and start to explore different areas that you might not have considered or known about in the past. So, education was always a passion point for her, which is why we love to help teachers. We want to continue that legacy.
And Dr. Harkness worked with a lot of teachers over her time. In fact, it went in waves often when teachers would have to re-sign their contracts. A few months before, there'd be a wave of teachers who understood that she did what they were looking to do, which was exit teaching and find a different path that felt more fulfilling or financially gave them what they needed as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, definitely.
So one of the most common questions that we get from teachers is, but who else would want me? What else could I do if I wasn't a teacher?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that this is similar to other career challenges as well, because we get so tunnel vision or focused in the lingo and or the environment that we have been in for so long. And often teachers have been teachers for quite some time. So just understanding that your skill set The same skill can be marketed differently, depending on who the target audience is. And if principals or academia folk are not your target audience anymore, you obviously would start to speak about yourself differently. And so it's the same skill, just spoken about or highlighting different parts of that skill when you're reaching out. I think the biggest challenge that I know our clients run into is they just start speaking about it without knowing who that next target audience is, meaning where are they going next. So when you just start speaking in generalities, can't say that word, when you start speaking broader, I think that it doesn't make a lot of sense and it sounds very generic. And so you have to really get clear on who your next target audience is, what kind of job or position that you're applying for or talking to, and then it becomes easier. Does that make sense?
It does, it does. So one example that speaks to what you just shared is the idea of, I've heard from teachers that I've had to manage a lot of commitments at the same time. I have to manage my classroom and parents and my administration. And that's completely true. And that speaks to what is done in a school system. When you understand what kind of job it is that you want next, you'd speak about that experience differently. So for instance, if you discovered that you really do enjoy managing multiple things at once, then perhaps being in project management would be a wonderful fit. In project management, there's also those competing commitments and a lot of people you have to manage. They're called key stakeholders. So you would talk about how in teaching, you also had to manage multiple key stakeholders simultaneously. So understanding the lingo of where you're headed next makes it easier to bridge the gap. And what I've seen is that the possibilities are endless. A lot of teachers think I have to stick with teaching. I can be a corporate trainer or I can go work in ed tech, and both of those things are true. But the truth is teachers have a vast amount of skills that they gain, and you can highlight any of those depending on what it is you want next. So the first piece to get clear is, what do you even want? What do you enjoy? And how can we get more of that in your career?
Yeah. And what are your strengths? What do you get energized doing? I think, again, similar to most other career path searches or journeys, it's that whole idea of what strengths do I want to take forward? And then where can those be applied? And that's where everybody gets stuck in the scrolling of Indeed or LinkedIn or wherever they're job searching, just looking for a job that looks appealing instead of taking what they know and actively searching or engaging in something that makes sense. So I feel like a lot of times people start backwards, and that scroll that we're so used to on our phones happens with the job search too, of just, I'm just going to continue to look for job descriptions until I find the right one, instead of actually knowing what they're going out there to search for using specific keywords that really are related back to themselves and their strengths and what they want.
Well, and it makes sense. When we often hear from teachers, they're in burnout mode right now. They're so drained, they're exhausted, and we're looking for somewhere to release the steam a little bit. So we go onto our phone and we start searching, how can I get out of this? And then we find ourselves frustrated, wondering, can we even find another job? Who would hire me? And I think that moment of pause to say, instead of knowing what I don't want, I need to take a pause and figure out what I do want so that I understand how to search on these platforms and make it actually beneficial and worth my time.
Yeah, and the other thing that scroll does is it just kills your confidence, because you're stuck in that teacher lingo or whatever you were before. It is, you're not going to find that in what you're scrolling, because you're not scrolling in the teacher space. So everything you read, you're going to say, well, I'm not that, I don't have that, I don't have that experience. And it's just, again, said differently. You probably do have those things, but you're not thinking of it in that new marketing mentality. You're thinking of it still in managing administration and principals instead of key stakeholders. So you wouldn't know that when you see that phrase, key stakeholders, that you actually do have that experience. So you just start to feel down and bad about yourself instead of saying, oh, I got that, and feeling confident. And so it just puts you more in depression oftentimes, unfortunately.
Teachers, you absolutely have opportunities outside of the school system. I think one thing that feels so important to tell this group is that just because you don't see it yet doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That you have been surrounded by teachers who also love teaching and have done teaching for a very long time.
Yeah.
When you hit pause and start to talk to other groups, what you'll find is that it's extremely common to have more than one job. It is not abandoning students to decide to stop abandoning yourself. And when you start to talk to other people who have left teaching or who have changed other careers, you're going to find it's not only normal, but it's highly possible that you land another job that gives you more peace of mind, or a little more of whatever it is that you are looking for.
Yeah, and that's another good point of where to start, because some people are burnt out because they have to be in the classroom every single day and they're really craving flexibility. Some people are just tired of being on all the time and they're really craving some work that they can do one-on-one independently instead of being on and in front of a classroom all day. So really digging into what success means to you and what specific things you're going towards, again, that whole what are we heading towards, who's our target audience, is so important to understand about yourself first, so that when you do start searching, instead of it just being scrolling all over the place, it's intentional and we're looking for or at least pointing that compass in a certain direction instead of the compass whirling all around and searching everywhere.
Absolutely. And it reminds me a little bit of a quote that you and I love, Heather, by Mary Annice Helger, that said, "What if hope isn't what leads to action? What if courage leads to action and hope is what comes next?" And to me, how this applies to teachers is hope comes when you can see what's on the other side of the fence. And that's not the first step. I think oftentimes teachers are nervous to say they want to leave teaching because they don't know what they want to do next. But the courage to say, I want to leave, gives the ability to then start taking action to searching for what is next. And that action is going to lead to the hope, because you will start seeing what your options are.
Absolutely. And that action also just builds the confidence that you can do something else. And even if it's a little bit each week or each day, that you're taking the next step forward to making a change, as you continue to do that consistently, I promise the confidence builds and you really start to, it's just like I say about our program too, when everyone starts that they'll start to hate their job a little less for a little while naturally, just because there's hope of something else. And it really is true as people start to understand, oh, I have other options. It's a sense of freedom. Dr. Harkness's famous quote about knowing your freedom is knowing your options, is knowing that, okay, there are other things out there. And as you take those little action steps each and every day, you'll start to build the confidence and hope of where you're headed next. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, or even if the very next job that you get to isn't the ultimate end all be all job, it is a transition point to getting you there.
I love that. So I have a question for you, Heather. Why do teachers have such a hard time leaving? We see more teachers that call and take several years to decide to take the step towards a life that they want or freedom. Why do you think it is so hard for teachers to leave?
I think that the heart of almost all teachers is that they want to give back and help and make a difference in students' lives. And they feel like there is no other way to do that, or there aren't those options that are going to make them, quote unquote, feel so good, even though they're feeling so miserable oftentimes in their current position. But that they're going to sacrifice. The heart of a teacher is that they want to give back, that they want to serve others, especially students. And so understanding the why behind why you started teaching is so important. For some people, it is a completely different reason, but really getting to the heart of why teaching, why you started there, where the love initially was. Like you were mentioning at the beginning of the conversation, a lot of times I think artistic or creative people got into teaching because they thought, oh, I can bring my creativity to a really good thing of helping students. And then they get into a certain situation, school district, public schools, where they go, oh my gosh, I actually can rarely do this, if ever, bring my creativity because of standardized testing or whatever it is. And so then they realize that the reason they're in it is right, but what they're having to do task-wise day to day is completely wrong, and it drains them instead of energizes them, and then they quickly get into the burnout like we were talking about. Um, so yes, I think the main reason to answer your question is just that they don't think they can get what they were originally looking for anywhere else because of that tunnel vision. Do you have any other ideas on why it might be?
I think you nailed it. And I think the only thing I can really do is extend on it a little bit and say, I've heard a couple teachers say they don't want to give up on the students.
Yeah.
And that's not what's happening. It's not a giving up on. To decide that you are going to honor yourself and what is best for you and your family is not a giving up on students or your fellow coworkers. There's a level of love and loyalty that it takes to be a teacher, and stopping and saying, I am going to be an example here of being true to yourself and honoring what you do love, and knowing that, to your point, if you get to the heart of why you got into teaching, you will then find other paths to do that. For instance, we had a client who was a teacher and was super passionate um, about encouraging people who had really low self-confidence. And so she was finding that in the school system, she was not able to do that because there was a lot of curriculum requirements that didn't allow her to bring in the pieces that she felt were really important to doing what it was she really wanted to do with her students. And when she left teaching, she went into art after that. And that was really her bridge job, was I'm going to start selling art and figuring out what it is that I want to do. And now she's bridging that gap by starting to teach in a different capacity, not within the school system, and use art as a way to help students build self-confidence. So she had to take the leap of faith to say, I know it's not this, and let me start in a direction and find a next path. So it's just one example of how it's happened. I think that's kind of a less conventional path to leave and go do art or something that's maybe not as secure, but there's so many different options out there. And it just starts with saying, I'm going to hold true to what I know is really important to me and put that before the how, which is teaching.
Yeah. I know for a lot of teachers, connection is important. They want to connect with the students, and that relationship is important to them. I know that we've had a teacher client that went into the insurance business because they wanted to continue to help people with something that they thought was really important to them and connect with people. This particular person actually was like, you know what, I think it'd be nice to connect with adults for a while instead of children. So hence the insurance bridge. But I think that the ultimate point, instead of trying to say teachers are good at these several occupations, because as you and I know, program management, or like you said, ed tech, are some of the common things that teachers go to next. But it's really not about where do I go next and throwing out a position or a specific industry or occupation. It's really about, like we were talking about, the what you like about teaching and drilling down to that, and then having us help you brainstorm on where else you can do that that you might not have thought of in the past. So looking at your different strengths and assessments and trying to really understand, okay, this is where your natural strengths are. This is also why you loved teaching. Where do all of those things come together? And again, it's that whole, in this general area, the compass is pointed in that direction. So let's start looking at some positions here. Sometimes it's not even a specific industry or title, but a type of company. In other words, a type of company that feels more like family or has a connection in terms of the team or how they work together. I'm looking for that instead of a specific industry or title is another way that we start to explore and investigate the different options. So it's so customized and individualized for each person. That's one of the common, to me, myths of, oh, what else should teachers be? And just kind of throwing them into different occupations or titles doesn't always make sense. And that's why another reason I think it's confusing and difficult for people to leave and get started.
Such an important point. So Heather, let's speak to our teachers for a second. If you are a teacher and you are overwhelmed with where to even begin with your career change, we're going to give you a couple next steps. So Heather, what would you suggest as a next or a first step for a teacher if they're desiring to move out of teaching?
Other than calling us. No. No, I really do think that having a conversation with someone, sometimes it's a therapist, sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's us, but having that conversation of, and even writing down or journaling where the struggle is, why all of a sudden you don't love it, or why has it been compounding over time? What has changed? What don't you love about it? And what you do love about it. Like just getting really clear on these are the things I love, these are the things I don't love, and reflecting yourself on, have you changed? Has the job changed? Like, where has the change occurred? To me, just that self reflection is key. You can definitely do that having a consult call with us, but you can also do it with a friend, a therapist, a parent, somebody that's gotten out of teaching, other teachers, anybody. That to me is a great first step.
That's awesome.
You have one?
I do, and it piggybacks off of what you have said, which is I am going to encourage teachers to find 30 to 45 minutes a week to work on themselves. And the reason I specifically say that as a beginning starting point is that teaching is such a selfless career, one where selflessness is honored, and taking time or claiming time for yourself is often discouraged. So the first step is deciding to say, I am valuable enough to claim some time to work on what it is that I want next.
I love that so much.
So can use that time to give us a call, to do all the things that Heather said, to talk to a therapist. And if finding 30 to 45 minutes for yourself is something that you struggle to think that you are worth or can do, I think that's your first starting point.
Yeah.
It's information to say, I want something different and I'm not finding that I'm worth it. So before I can even find a career, I need to dig into why do I feel like I can't start the process.
I love that so much. I also think that teachers tend to work really hard and then they have their breaks, that, you know, their mentality, whether it's winter break or summer break or whatever. And that goes back to our consistency piece. That whole power of action really comes from a little bit each day. So your daily reminder is so important, because if you only revisit it during the breaks when you have a moment to breathe and realize, okay, maybe it is okay to think about myself because the students are on break. If you only use that time, you get stuck in that rut of, oh, it'll be next time or next year or whatever. And you lose that hope. But back to that quote, you know, it's so important that we stay consistent, whether it's after school. I know oftentimes school starts early, so mornings could be tricky to find that time to, unless you're a morning person, get up extra early, but just carve out that time. And I know as a working mom and having 5 million things, there's so many reasons and ways to avoid that. I've done it myself a million times, but we can't stress enough how important it is and how much you're worth doing that for. So yes, excellent, excellent suggestion.
Yeah, we've seen teachers do this on their lunch break. We've seen teachers do this 30 minutes on a weekend, or on their car rides home. There's absolutely a time. It's kind of like if you were looking, if fitness was a goal for you, that you have to figure out a time to work out. And it's the exact same thing here, is you have to be willing to invest in yourself in order to bridge the gap to something new.
Yes, teachers, please prioritize yourselves, because I know I can't thank you enough. My kiddos have been so fortunate to have so many amazing teachers that I've gotten to know, and there really are no better humans out there than teachers. So please take the time for yourself and prioritize yourself for just a little while in your life.
Well, wonderful as always to talk with you, Heather, and I look forward to hopefully hearing from teachers, encouraging their growth and helping them figure out what's next, whether it's in the school system or out.
Yes, and thank you again for all your dedication to the kids out there. We also appreciate it. Have a great day. Talk to you soon, Hollis.
Bye.